Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite techniques for winter bass fishing. It's also probably one of the easiest techniques to catch fish any time of year, but especially in the winter. So today we're going to break all that down in today's video, so stay tuned and let's get right into it. So this little guy right here is the Finesse swim bait, and I absolutely love this thing for smallmouth bass. It works for largemouth and spotted bass as well. I've caught fish on Lake Hartwell with this technique. I've caught fish pretty much anywhere north of where we are right now. We're gonna try and catch them in down here anyway. As you can tell, we're in Florida, a bunch of reeds and everything behind me. Everything up north is actually frozen right now, and we got the chance to come down here and fish for a week. So my idea while I'm down here is that I'm gonna try and knock out a bunch of content on the water videos, even if they don't apply to Florida. Like, this technique is probably not something I would throw in Florida. Still gonna try and catch a fish on it and get some on the water footage of fishing this bait. But since this water isn't frozen, I'm gonna try and get on the water shots of a bunch of different baits and videos so that you guys have something to watch over the winter while I'm stuck in the house filming stuff in my basement and in my studio, so you don't get bored of just seeing the same thing and me talking about baits and never using them. That being said, some of these videos coming up, I might not actually catch fish in them because I'm talking about the technique that might not work in Florida, but I'm gonna try and catch fish on it anyway. We're still gonna do a breakdown of everything. So we're gonna talk about the rod, reel, gear you need, how to fish this bait, and we're still gonna try and catch a fish on it. Have a bunch of other video ideas to go through, and once a week throughout the entire winter there'll be a release of an on the water video. So hopefully that interests you guys. Hit that subscribe button down below if you're interested in that. Before we get into today's video about gear, we also have another announcement. This guy right here is a box of Pulse Fish lures. So you guys actually helped me out a ton. Apparently that video I did talking about the Pulse Fish lures, if you don't know what they are, they're the little plexiglass lip scrounger type heads. I did a video talking about how to rig a fluke on those and catch fish when they're feeding on tiny bait fish, and I'll link that one at the end of today's video. Well, the owner of the company actually reached out to me and asked if I would continue to work with them, and I got you guys a discount code. So if you want to help the channel out at all, you can go to Pulse Fish Lures. We're going to be talking about one of the jig heads in today's video, and if you're interested in buying any of their lures in the future, you can use my code NQF10. You'll save 10% off your entire order, and you'll be helping out the channel a ton. Thank you guys so much for your support. I can't believe one video got the attention of a company that you guys watched and appreciated so much, and I cannot thank you guys enough for all the support I've got and how much I enjoy making these videos for you guys. So without rambling on too much more, let's get into today's video talking about the Finesse swim bait. The first thing we're going to talk about is gear. This rod and reel combo is a little bit different than the one I usually use with my Finesse swim bait, mostly because I needed to put braid on the other one to bring down to Florida to throw a topwater for a different video. But this setup right here also works just fine. This is my old jerkbait rod. So this is a Dobyns Fury 703. It's a medium heavy fast action, but I found that the Dobyns rods run a little bit heavier than what they're rated. So this is more like a medium action. A 6'9" medium or a light medium heavy is what I use typically on my bait casting setup. So if you're interested in any of like finding a good rod, anything in that medium category that you would throw a jerkbait with, gonna work just fine for you. So that's the one that I'd use there. I have a Lew's Carbon Fire speed spool on here. This reel isn't my favorite reel. It was 80 bucks. I tried to go a little bit cheaper than the regular speed spool, and it was a mistake. The regular speed spool is much better. I'll link that one down below instead of this one, just because this isn't my favorite reel. I've had a lot of problems with it. And then I spooled it up with 12-pound straight fluorocarbon. That's usually what I like to fish with my Finesse swim baits. In the winter time, you can go even lighter. I've gone to 10-pound test straight fluorocarbon, or the other thing I'll do is actually take a spinning rod like I got right here. I'll take my spinning rod that I fish wacky rigs on. I will put 15-pound braid on it and an 8-pound fluorocarbon leader of about 10 to 15 foot. Either one will work just fine for you, whichever setup you like. If you like spinning rods better, go with that. If you like casting rods better, go with that. Like I said, this is gonna be one of the easiest techniques to do. So even if you don't know how to throw a bait caster, this technique is still for you. Get this setup right here. You could even just put straight 8-pound fluorocarbon on here. You would be just fine with that as well. I've done all three of those options and they've all worked exactly the same. It's very simple. Trust me, that's the hardest part, is getting your setup right. But basically anything you'd throw a wacky rig on, or anything you'd throw a jerkbait on if you're using casting gear. Now, the rest of your setup, super basic right here, consists of two components, a jig head and a swim bait, and that's it. The swim bait choice is very critical because you're going to be fishing this bait very slowly on the bottom. My favorite one to use is this 6th Sense Divine swim bait. I have a 3.8 on for down here in Florida because this is in golden shiner color, and it's the only package I had of it, and they feed on golden shiners down here. But the 3.8 will work if you have bigger bait fish, but it's not my favorite for this technique. I prefer the 3.2, or you could even go to the 2.7. Those two, perfect for this technique. This jig head, like I said, is one of the new pulse fish jig heads I'm trying out. This is the Matt Airy finesse swim bait head, I believe it is. Again, I'll link everything down below if you're looking for any of this stuff. Big differences than what I usually use. You know that I like to pour my own jig heads. I've done it for years. There's a couple similarities with this jig head and a couple differences that I think are gonna help me catch more fish. The first thing, similarity, Gamakatsu hook 2-aught. It's the same hook that I put in my regular ball head jigs that I pour for myself. So don't skimp on the hook, it's very important. I really like that Gamakatsu 604 jig head hook. I don't know what it is, it doesn't bend out as easily. It'll still bend out if you get stuck in a rock, so you can get your bait back and like bend the hook back more times than not, but it doesn't bend out on a big fish. It gets them hooked really good, it's sharp. That's the way that I like to go with my hook. Two differences is that it has an eyeball. Not that that makes a difference, but sometimes a little bit of realism can help. But the head shape keels a little bit better, so this swim bait will stay upright, and especially with what we're going to talk about here with how you want to fish this during the winter, that's going to be important over a ball head jig. Ball head would still work if that's all you have. Trust me, I've done it for years, it works just fine. But if you're interested in getting these, they will work as well. The last difference right here is it comes with a screw lock on the shank of the hook over a traditional keeper. My ball head jigs that I've fished for years, they're great. You have to have super glue in your boat at all times, because if you fish this bait and you catch a fish, they're gonna rip that bait right off. And then you're gonna have to get another one over and over and over again, or you can super glue them up on the head of the jig, is what I've done for a long time, but then you got to have super glue and make sure it doesn't leak, all that kind of stuff. The screw lock, I've used them on the 6th Sense jig heads for bigger swim baits. The screw lock is amazing. You just thread it up on there and twist it on a few times. That bait will last you almost all day. You literally could catch hundreds of fish on that bait, and it does not come off until, honestly, what will happen before you lose the bait up here by the collar, the bait will rip and the tail will come off before anything else. So that extremely increases the longevity of your bait. You'll catch a lot more fish and save a lot more money on swim baits. The last thing we're going to talk about with gear here is your swim bait color selection. So like I said, I talked about 3.2 is better, and the reason I like these Divine swim baits, they work great if you're fishing colder water. I use the whales in warmer water. I've talked about that a little bit on the channel as well. If you're looking for another similar one to this, or something that can still work in the winter and you don't want a 6th Sense bait, the Kitex swing fat impacts or even the easy shiners are awesome. I actually prefer the easy shiners in winter over the swing fat impacts or these Divine swim baits, and there's one reason for that. That swing fat impact, it has that fat body, has more wobble to it. In the winter, their fish are really cold, and you're not gonna fish this bait very fast. So these Divine swim baits, they're not fat at all. They're very tapered and narrow, and just the tail has a subtle tail kick. It's the same thing on those easy shiners. You want a very subtle tail kick on this, and it's just going to be a nice gentle kick, but you want it to move at slow speeds, and the Divine swim bait's soft enough to do that. When it comes to your color selection, I keep it really simple. You can, like I said, I got the golden shiner one on here for today. We're in Florida, but if you're interested in doing this anywhere else where those fish feed on shad, alewife, blueback herring, the regular forages, white if your water's a little bit stained, or if you have really clear water. My favorite color is Pro Blue. I probably throw this one 95% of the time. If you're looking to get just one bait, one color, get a 3.2 Divine swim bait in Pro Blue and put it on a 1/4 ounce jig head, this Pulse Fish jig head, and that is it. So you're gonna thread your bait on there, you're gonna go ahead and hook it up, you're gonna fit it on there nice and straight, run it around the hook shank, and just twist that bait on there, and it'll be locked up on there, and you're ready to go. Tie that to your rod with your favorite knot. I got a Palomar knot here, and we're ready to go fish this thing. So let's get out on the water and see if we can catch us a couple fish on this swim bait, and we'll show you how to fish this thing in the winter and talk about the types of areas that you're gonna wanna look for this time of year. All right, so now that we talked about the gear on rigging up this Finesse swim bait, let's go ahead and cast this around, show you how to fish it. Maybe by some miracle we'll catch one down here, but I don't expect that to happen because this is, like I said, not very much a Florida technique. But that doesn't mean we're not gonna try. We'll see if we can do this, and if not, there'll be many more swim bait videos on my channel to come in the spring once we get out there fishing for some smallmouth. But I want to get this out there for you guys that still can fish places like South Carolina, Tennessee, North Carolina, fishing for spotted bass or even smallmouth in those areas where it's still cold but the water isn't frozen like it is up in the north. This is a technique that's going to be great for that. And the first thing that we're going to do is make a good long cast. The most important thing with this technique is to make a very long cast, because you can get bit anywhere on this cast. I mean, this bait will work the entire way back to you. What I like to do with this bait is after I make that long cast, I'm going to let this sink all the way down to the bottom. Usually in the winter, those fish are going to be tight to the bottom. They'll be hanging around cover, rock piles, drop-offs, whatever you can find down there. I'll watch my line until that bait hits the bottom, and then when it hits the bottom, I'm just going to start a slow, steady retrieve, reeling it back to me, just bouncing along the bottom. And you'll feel the bait and the jig head bouncing off of the cover down there, and that's okay. You want it to do that. I'll just slowly work it back to me, and then you'll get to a point in your cast where you feel that bait lift up off the bottom and start coming back up to the boat. That's when I'm just going to go ahead and reel that back in and make another cast. So I'm going to go ahead and bomb that back out there, let it sink back down to the bottom again. There's no twitching, there's no erratic movement, there's nothing special about this retrieve. You literally just reel it in. It is that simple. That is why this is probably the easiest technique to do for winter bass fishing. The key is to reel it slow enough. So I have that fast gear ratio reel, but I'm going to reel this thing so slow that it just bounces into everything on the bottom down there. I won't reel it very quickly. You can speed it up a little bit like this if you want to get it going a little bit faster. The fish are more aggressive, whatever the conditions might be. It's not to say that you can't do that, but I like that really slow retrieve, just keeping this thing on the bottom at all times. And if it leaves the bottom, I'll show you what I do here. Whenever this bait leaves the bottom, if I'm reeling it, I'll kill the bait and let it sink back down to make sure it's maintaining bottom contact. The longer you can keep this thing on the bottom, or within like 6 inches to a foot of the bottom, the more bites you're gonna get in this cold water. And that's why, especially you guys that fish in like the middle part of the country there, where you have some deep lakes, you're gonna need that lighter pound test to keep that bait down on the bottom. You'll also have to stop reeling to let it sink back down. So in Florida, that's never going to happen to me. I'm hitting bottom like crazy. But if I were to leave the bottom, I would kill it, I'd watch my line sink back down to the bottom, and I'd start that retrieve again. It's also important, you're going to have to reel very slowly to keep it on the bottom. So that's why it's very important to have that swim bait that moves at very light or very slow speeds. So those swim baits we talked about that kick very subtly but at a very slow reel, that's going to be very important for this technique as well. So the lighter pound test is going to keep it down there. You have less diameter of line, so it'll stay down deeper. You pick the right size jig head, you reel slow enough, just a slow steady retrieve down there, and you make sure you have a bait that's still actively kicking down there when you're reeling this slow. All those combined is going to equal catching a bunch of fish. You just got to find the areas that those fish like to live in. If you're in a pond, just cast around and search until you find the fish. If you're fishing a lake, you're oftentimes going to be looking for rock piles, or any other type of structure that will hold those fish that they can basically get on in the winter time, especially if it has bait. You're gonna look for areas that have bait and deeper water access, and that's gonna be where those fish are gonna wanna be that time of year, and just pound those areas. They're gonna school up this time too, so if you catch one, I just missed one right there. If you catch one, more often than not, there will be others with it, so just keep casting away, and oftentimes you can catch a bunch of fish in one area doing this technique. And it's a very easy technique. I'm using a bait caster like we talked about, but if you wanted to use a spinning rod, you could do that as well. Anybody could do this technique. If you're just fishing, just learning how to fish, just taking someone fishing for the first time, whether it's fall, spring, or winter, give them this bait and technique and tell them just to reel it really slowly, put them in some areas with fish, and you'll be catching a bunch of fish in no time. So let's keep casting around a little. We'll see if we can get one. Unfortunately, we were not able to find us a victim on the finesse swim bait, but if you want to see a video where I did actually catch some fish and see this bait in action, go ahead and check this video out right here. Caught a bunch of fish on it up on Lake Erie in the early spring, similar to winter type fishing. So check that video out. If you enjoyed today's video, hit the like button down below and make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any more of my fishing videos coming up, and thanks for watching.